Well, yeah, welcome everybody. This is our first meeting of the year, so happy New Year. Hope it's going well for you. This is primarily the Central Texas Section Life Member Affinity Group and the Consultants Network uh, group from the Central Texas section. But I do want to do a shout out. We do have Dallas and Houston here. I think is it John from Dallas, Jim and Katajan or something from Houston,
Yeah.
and also Galveston Bay section joined us as a late co-sponsor.
Okay, great.
Welcome from around Texas.
Thank you.
And the just brief description: the Consultants Network is here to help consultants get together, um, share job opportunities, publicize their skills, and so forth. And the Life Member, it's for people 65 years and older who have been IEEE members long enough for the combined age plus number of years as IEEE membership to be greater than or equal to 100. We in Life Members tend to be a little broader in the kind of topics we'll talk about. In our monthly meetings, we can get into health related stuff or mobility related stuff that is not as technical electronically as usual. But we do always remind you that you can send suggestions for topics you would like to have covered in future meetings. Send it to me, send it to Lewis, send it to Kai. Any one of us will get on it right away. If you know somebody who is good at talking about the subject you like, that's even better. Let us know who that is, and it can even be you. You can volunteer to present at one of these meetings. And I think I left a slide in there. I shouldn't have. Here are the officers for the Consultants Network. And Sankaren and Uday, welcome. These are new officers.
Bill,
Yes.
is or anyone online right now? Do you see Bill's presentation? I mean,
Yes.
I'm only seeing Kai's Texas.
Okay, let me stop sharing on mine. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
I'm not going to go back and start over.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so Vice Chair Sankaran and Secretary Uday, we're really glad the Consultants Network for quite a few years. And Lewis is chairman. You see him, you've heard from him. I'm treasurer of that group. Kai's the program manager, Wiping Yin webmaster.
Unstable internet. Okay. They come and go.
Then for Life Members, here we are. You'll see some names repeating. Kai is treasurer. I'm chair of that group. Clyde Springen is the vice chair. Tom Grimm is our secretary, and Kai is program manager for both groups. John Purvis is the webmaster. Here we have the problem. We are kind of passing positions around in order to keep going. So we would like to hear from any Life member out there. And you do have to be a Life member to be an elected officer in this group. If you want to become part of the leadership, just let us know and we will put you on the ballot for next year. This is set for this year. And before I go on, I want to give a shout out one more person. Andrew Blewett is online. He is the chairman of the Central Texas section. So we're glad that Andrew is joining this meeting. Talk about next month's meeting. It's going to be post 2024 election U.S. economic forecast by Dr. Lee Price. He is a retired economist, lives in the same place that Kai does. then point out a volunteer opportunity. So this is dual purpose. Life member conference, a life members conference is coming up in June 11th through 13th at Tufts University. Anyone interested in going, go take a look at the website, see what this is all about, especially for the life member.
With their effort to limit prescriptions of the abortion drug mifepristone, the states want the federal government to prohibit health prescriptions.
I need to silence somebody.
Somebody, yeah.
Can only be used in the first 17 weeks of pregnancy.
All right, thanks, Kai.
Streets of traffic tonight, APD is sharing data.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And even if you're not going to the conference, if you would like to volunteer to review papers, they're still looking for some reviewers for submitted papers to that conference. Contact Dennis Ferguson, dferguson at IEEE.org, or John Purvis, john.purvis at IEEE.org, and they will set you up to review some papers. The other thing I'd like to mention is we are going to continue what is becoming a tradition, go to the Bullock History Museum, that's here in Austin, for what's known as Science Thursday. It'll be early in May, and you go down to the museum and you help run experiments, simple experiments for elementary school age kids up, I think maybe up through high school, to get them introduced to how exciting science can be. So those two things are coming up. And it brings us to tonight's meeting, Texas Power 2025 update. James Woodrick is a retired engineer. He'll be talking to us about this. I'm sorry we could not arrange for a big ice storm for you, James, to highlight how important this grid is, but I think the interest level is pretty high anyway. 28-year career at DuPont, technology, operations, business and manufacturing management, and then 10 years as president of the Texas Chemical Council, which is the trade association representing the state's chemical industry. Jim is doing something that a lot of us should do in retirement. I think he's using the opportunity to explore other topics, become an expert in other topics that he's interested in. And he's interested in science related to climate change and energy. So that's how he got around to thinking that he could talk about this tonight to us, about the state of the grid in 2025. As a chemical engineer, MS Chemical Engineering from the University of Texas here in Austin. Pretty sure that's it. I will stop sharing and turn this over to Jim.
I will put our,
Yeah, go ahead.
can you put our put my slides
Oh, yeah,
up?
sure.
Yeah.
The slide. Here's the slide. Okay, right here.
Okay, is everybody seeing that first slide?
Yes.
I assume so. Okay, well, hello out there to all of you all. It's a pleasure to be here, and you're correct. This is a kind of a passion for me. I've been very interested in, where we're going to get our electricity. So that's what I'm going to try to talk to you about tonight. How does the grid work? A lot of focus on reliability and bringing in renewable power. And so let's just go ahead and get started. A lot of this stuff, I'm sure that most of you all are going to be quite familiar with, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. ERCOT is the grid that supplies about 90% of Texas. There are 3 such grids in the United States. You can see them on the map. There is very limited interconnection between the 3 of those grids. If you look within ERCOT, this map shows you that there's about 52,000 miles of high voltage wires. and about 1,250 generators that make up this electrical grid for ERCOT. And if you look at how does Texas compare to other states, that's what's on this chart. We are twice as much in terms of net generation as Florida, who's number 2. So we're far and away the largest generator of electricity in the states, and we've got the lowest price. You can see that on the chart on the right. We're about half of the retail price of electricity that is California. We've got a wonderful story for bringing in renewables in Texas. All the way back in 2025, our legislature saw that we wanted to do that, and so they passed some laws that made $7 billion available, and with that, we built 3,600 miles of wires. You can see the green lines on the map, and we brought as much power as the whole state of Colorado uses from West Texas back to where the cities are. And we did all that for around $10 a month on a residential electricity bill. It's an amazing story, and you can see the comparison with states. We are far and away the top state on wind energy, and we just passed California this year in terms of grid solar energy. So we've got a lot to be proud of as far as bringing in renewables. We have had a lot of growth and demand in the grid. You can see that in this chart. And fundamentally, over the last decade, what we've seen is that renewables have come in and they've replaced coal. We've gone up in renewables and down in coal, and the growth that we've needed to provide for has been done by more natural gas generation. First, we brought in wind. And the state on the left side there shows you the 10 largest wind generators. Most of them are in West Texas and the Panhandle. You'll see some down though in the lower Rio Grande Valley. And what you may not have remembered from that grid chart is we did not put in any new high voltage wires connecting South Texas to the rest of the state. And you'll see in a minute that that's been a bit of a problem for us. But there's where the wind is, and solar is just coming in right now, and it's going in all across the state. And so there's lots of solar coming in. And we've also, just within the past year or two, started adding a lot of grid scale batteries to help after the solar shuts down when the sun goes down. We've about doubled the battery capacity in 2024, and you'll see again that we're still going way up with that. Batteries are good for 1 to 2 to maybe 3 hours after sundown, and then that's all they can do. The way it's set up is ERCOT can't tell them when to discharge. The battery companies decide that themselves based on when it's most profitable. There have been a few problems with the batteries, but not too many. Some of the inverters have caused a couple of grid failures, and batteries, of course, can catch fire, but that's not been a major issue. The batteries are coming in and they're doing just fine. Now, everybody remembers Winter Storm Uri in 2021. Some more on that in a minute, but we've also had some other, Uri was a disaster, and we've had several other, what I call close calls, 3 winter storms you can see, and then we had a heat wave in 2023. We did not lose power during those winter storms and that heat wave, but we came close. So I call them close calls. Here's Uri. This was February of 2021. A big winter storm came in. It was cold for a long time. And early on February the 15th, I'll call it a blizzard for a Texan, but it really got cold in a hurry, such that it shut down a bunch of generators and a bunch of natural gas wells and pipelines, and every source of power that we had took a hit from that winter storm. Wind, gas, coal, and nuclear, all of them had outages. And the black line you can see on top there is the projection of what the demand would have been if we were able to supply it, which of course we're not. And if you look at that, there's a deficit between what we could make and what we wanted to make of about 20 gigawatts that lasted for about 3 days. And that was absolutely massive disruption. Now, here's the question that everybody says, could imports from other states have helped during Uri? And the answer is really clear. It's no, not even close, despite what you've seen and heard in a lot of the news media. Our two big neighbors, Louisiana and Oklahoma, were having their own forced demand cuts. They didn't have any power to spare, and they were importing power from their own neighbors. So we didn't have any available. But bigger than that, as I said, our deficit was about 20 gigawatts for 3 days. The entire normal demand for the states of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana combined are about 20 gigawatts. And so, in order to save Texas, we would have had to shut the three neighboring states completely down. So the answer is imports from Uri would not have helped. Here is our peak demand day. So far, it occurred on August the 10th, 2023. This is the ERCOT generation for that particular day. And you can see on the bottom, coal and nuclear, just all they could give, very reliable. Wind and solar, we had pretty good that day. Thank goodness for the wind, because we couldn't have made it without it. But we still needed a whole lot of power to meet that peak demand, and we provided that with natural gas, as you can see on that chart. And the little red line on top shows you what batteries gave us. So they were there a little bit, but not much. Now, here is last week on January the 9th. You all will remember we had a little cold spell come through. It wasn't serious in terms of power. We weren't threatening to shut down, but it got really calm and cloudy on that day, January the 9th. The Germans have a word for it. They call it Dunkelflaute, and it means dark doldrums. It means the sun is not shining very bright and the wind isn't blowing. So you can see the generation there. Along the bottom is nuclear and coal, just as steady as they can be throughout the day. And on the top two lines, you can see the orange solar and the light blue wind. There was some of each, but not much. And so we made up the difference with natural gas. And thank goodness we had the natural gas. If you were to triple or quadruple the amount of solar and wind capacity, it still wouldn't have been enough on this day. So this chart alone points out that we really need that natural gas on those kind of days. Now, 3 days later, the sky cleared and the wind started blowing good, and it was a good day for renewables. And you can see that here. During the middle of the day, renewables were providing about half of the power that we needed. And you think that's good. But if you recognize, and I'll show you more in a minute, we're going to double our solar capacity in 2 years. And had that been in place earlier this week, we would have shut natural gas completely off. And then you have to ask yourself, if you do that, how can a natural gas generator stay in business if it's not allowed to operate during the day? And so that brings up the issue of reliability for renewables and what you can do about that. So here's ERCOT's latest forecast for growing demand. You can see the history in the blue line. We've had pretty good growth, and you can see that amazing rise in demand that they are projecting, which is in the orange line there, coming up for the next 10 years. And where that demand is supposed to be coming from is primarily the AI data centers that you've all heard about, a little bit of cryptocurrency mining, and some other demand that assumes we're going to get into the business of using electricity to make hydrogen, basically. But most of the demand that we're projecting, or ERCOT's projecting, is coming from the expected growth in data centers in Texas. The Bitcoin miners, there's the biggest one, I think, is in Rockdale. But you can see those stars out there in West Texas. There's lots of Bitcoin miners that have nestled themselves up against the wind and solar facilities in West Texas, and they use a fair amount of power. The growth in the data centers is going to be primarily between Dallas and Austin and San Antonio. Call it Central Texas, if you will. And the projection is that if all of the growth that they have said they are going to bring actually comes to pass, the Austin, San Antonio area will be the second largest concentration of data centers in the United States. So it remains to be seen if that's going to happen, but that is what those companies are projecting they want to do. This is ERCOT's latest chart for where the growth is going to occur. You can see the sources on the bottom: gas, wind, solar, and battery. And you can see the years 2024 through 2030. And you will notice that there is not much gas and wind projected to be added anytime in the next few years, but there is a substantial amount of new solar that's coming in and new batteries that are coming in. We doubled solar in 2024, and we're going to double it again in 2025 and even more in 2026. The battery capacity is supposed to nearly triple in that 2-year time. And right now, Texas, again, is the #1 generator for wind, which we've had since we got started. We took over from California last year, and we will be the largest grid battery state this year. A lot of things are going on in several governments that affect this power consumption. One of the things we're trying to do is to cause more power consumption by reducing carbon emissions. And so we had some laws in 2022. We had the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. More on that in a minute. The Texas legislature did some things. EPA has passed a couple of rules that have an impact. And this year, the Department of Energy just says that they're going to provide $2 billion in subsidies to build high voltage transmission lines in the country. So these things are happening. Here's the Inflation Reduction Act. And its biggest provision for what we're talking about is the $161 billion that they call for clean energy. We have had an investment and a production tax credit for wind, solar, and batteries for a while now. And this particular act in 2022 extended those tax credits to 2031. And very importantly, it added the ability for new nuclear facilities to receive those same tax credits. So that's where the bulk of the money from the federal government is coming to support clean energy. And then you can see some other facilities down there. The other big one is we continue to provide subsidies to get people to buy electric vehicles. And of course, every electric vehicle has a battery that has to be charged, and that uses electricity. Just an important or an interesting, I think, thing on the bottom there. There is a well-known scientist in Europe, Bjorn Lomborg, and he used the official United Nations computer model for climate, and he basically plugged in everything that this particular act was supposed to do and the effect that it would have on energy. And that computer calculates that if you do everything we've said, it will lower the temperature by the end of this century by 1/1000th of a degree C. And so that just tells you that this is a hard road to hoe that we're involved in. So here's the other thing you hear a lot about: can batteries provide this solution? And the answer is hopefully so, but it's going to be a decade or two away. Meanwhile, it's just too expensive. And the technology just isn't good enough. We need new technology for batteries. There's some certainly underway, and it's hopeful that they'll come to pass, but we don't have them yet. And just for example, that picture down there at the bottom is the fairly new Tesla grid battery storage mega factory in California. If the city of Austin were to contract for the entire production for 1 year from that Tesla mega factory, it would, and installed it all around Austin, it would be enough to run Austin for 7 hours at its peak demand. So that's just another perspective that says that batteries are important and they can help, but they're not going to be the solution to the reliability issue with renewable energy. Now, here's the other thing that you hear a lot about. Let's connect to the other grids. We have some fairly small, 1.2 gigawatt. We've got 4 ties, I think, to the combination of Oklahoma and Mexico. It's not very much. A tie from Dallas to Mississippi has been proposed for a while now. ERCOT approved it in 2022. It's about 2 gigawatts, 400-mile long line. It's supposed to go from Dallas to Mississippi, but it's been completely stalled by lawsuits in Louisiana and Mississippi. And so Texas has said, okay, but the line is not under construction and it may never get under construction. I don't know. It's called Southern Cross Transmission. The other intertie that has been proposed in 2021 goes west. It starts at Pecos, Texas, and it goes 180, or would go 180 miles to El Paso. And of course, California is the ultimate recipient of that. It was proposed in 2021. The Texas PUC is still looking at it, has not been approved, and it might, but if it does, it'll be 2028 or 29 before it finally goes into place. So there is some possibility about some fairly small additions to transmission across the grid lines, but not a whole lot. There are some advantages to connections to the other grids. The biggest one is, the supply if you're in trouble, like with Uri, if we could have had that. Supply during brief outages. There are also a couple of disadvantages of routine exchange. And take the one to Mississippi. If these other states, we've got really cheap renewable energy in Texas, and if we allow other states to come in and bid for our energy and buy it, the prices in Texas are bound to go up. And the other issue that we worry about is right now, our own PUC and ERCOT makes the rules for the Texas grid. And if we do too much interchange, that will go to the federal government, and we think we can do it better. As a matter of fact, if the federal regulations were in place, we could have never done that CRES renewable thing. And I just asked the question, will a Texas taxpayer be willing to spend his money to build transmission lines so that our renewables can be sent to other states? And I think the answer is no. So the connection to other grids sounds good, but probably really isn't good for Texas. That's my opinion. Now, here's some legislation that did affect, possibly affected the futures that occurred in 2023, and that's to encourage more natural gas generation. We passed a Senate bill that is going to allow $7 billion of low interest loans to be granted to companies that want to build new dispatchable power. And what that means is natural gas and not wind and solar. And we asked the voters in Texas, did they think that was a good idea? And on November the 7th, 23, 65% of the Texans said, yes, that's a good idea. Excuse me. ERCOT went out to the takers and said, how many of you all would like some of that money? And there were a lot more that said we would than $7 billion worth. But how bad they wanted it will depend on whether or not we make some special pricing mechanisms in the PUC to make it advantageous for them to build a natural gas generator that might not run very often. The other thing that the legislature did is it provided for what they call ancillary services, and that means that we will pay a generator who can produce power for a short period of time for them to come online. And we also said that after 2027, any renewable energy provider that wants to come in can do so, but they have to pay for their own transmission requirements as well as to provide for the reliability. So it puts a lot greater disincentive on new renewables after 2027 than we have right now. And if you'll remember that those previous growth charts, it's after 2027 that we should have about all the renewables we can manage anyway, absent significant growth in the demand. Okay, here's something that happened earlier last year. EPA put out a new rule that said every new natural gas power plant and all existing coal plants must put in facilities to capture and sequester 90% of all of the carbon dioxide in their emissions. And that is a big deal. There is technology to capture that carbon, but it has not been demonstrated on the scale like we're talking about here. And furthermore, we really don't have much of a clue about the infrastructure that would be required to take that carbon dioxide and do something with it. And so there's a great big uncertainty on whether or not we have the ability to do what this new rule says. Several states have filed lawsuits against this rule, and we're going to have a new administration here in a month. And a lot of people think that this rule that was put in place last year is probably going to get scrapped soon. So it may not have an impact. If it stays in place, though, it certainly will have an impact on new natural gas generations. The rule as it stands does appear to exempt what we call peaker gas units. And here's an example of what that is. It's basically piston-driven engines driven by natural gas that turn a generator and make electricity. You can see the picture of it here. LCRA has announced that they're going to build 190 megawatts, 10 reciprocating engines in a plant between Lockhart and San Marcos, and it's going to be started up by the end of this year. And it's just like a car. You turn the key and the engine turns on and it starts generating electricity. So that's a peaker unit. It doesn't run most of the time. LCRA has also announced that a duplicate of that first unit should come online next year. So we have at least a few of these peaker gas generators that are presumably being built right now. This is an example of a big generator. It's called the Sandow Lakes Project, and it's located on what used to be a big Alcoa aluminum plant down in Rockdale. And what this company proposed to do early last year was to build 2 of these large combined cycle turbines, 1.2 gigawatt each, on that plant. They were going to start construction later this year and have them in operation by 2028. They made that announcement for that project before the EPA rule I just mentioned was put into effect. So I don't know whether the rule stays into effect, or if it does, I don't know if that requirement to add the carbon sequestering makes a difference for this project or not. But this is what one company wanted to do. There are a couple of other companies who have announced the intent to do similar things with these large gas turbine generators. So we have 2 big nuclear plants in Texas. One of them is South Texas down by Matagorda, and the other one is Comanche Peak. You can see pictures of them here. They each are about 2.5 gigawatts in power. And I'm just going to estimate that they probably take something like 200 to 250 acres. The combined 2 plants are probably using about 200 to 300 acres of land. And we know from experience that if you wanted to build 5 gigawatts of solar power, you have to pave 25,000 acres with solar panels to get 5 gigawatts, and that only runs when the sun's shining. So that gives you a comparison of land use between things like nuclear plants and solar generators. Now, if you're a fan of nuclear, and I am one, there is some encouragement in that the Dow Chemical Company has announced that they are going to begin building one of these small modular reactors on their plant down at Seadrift, which is between Victoria and Port Lavaca, down by Matagorda Bay. And they're supposed to start construction on that next year and be online with the first one in 2029. That's a picture of the Dow plant down there. They use a lot of electricity and steam to drive their distillation columns. These small reactors would provide both the electricity and the steam, and ultimately they're about 80 megawatts in size, and they're made by a company, a Texas company named X-Energy, out of Dallas. And Dow ultimately wants to put 4 of those reactors down by its Seadrift plant. Just last month, the results of a 1-year special study that Texas did came out in a report. It was called the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Working Group, and they were asked to make recommendations for what Texas should do to be able to build these small nuclear reactors. And the idea is that maybe we can do a repeat with nuclear energy of the same thing we did with renewable energy 20 years ago. So the idea is let's create a system that allows another CRES program that brings in small modular reactors, just like we brought in renewable energy 20 years ago. So they've got several recommendations that you can see here. The big one is to provide some money. That's the last item on there. In some way, they want to provide a bunch of money like that $7 billion loan for renewables. And presumably, the legislative session that's just about to start, presumably will address these recommendations. And I can't predict what they'll do, but I personally am hopeful that they will at least do something, because I think Texas has a real advantage in an ability to take advantage of this power source. So if you look to what's going to happen in the future, I think I've already shown you from ERCOT's projections that there is going to be a whole lot more solar and batteries coming in soon, this year, next year, and the year after. And so then you have to ask yourself, will these new incentives that we're going to have bring more natural gas generation, which we really need before we get to the nuclear reactors? And that is very difficult using normal economics, because these natural gas reactors have to run. And if we bring in a lot of renewables, they're not allowed to run. So that's an issue that we'll have to see how it comes out with the results of this 2025 legislative session. The other thing that we really need is more transmission lines to bring in even more of these renewables from West Texas. We, of course, need conservation efforts, and then there's the question about connecting to other grids and going nuclear. The biggest grid challenges that we have right now are the rapid demand growth that we talked about earlier, and the ability for more capacity for natural gas generation that we will need in the near term to provide this growth. We also have some transmission constraints that are causing us problems. And of course, we always struggle to maintain low prices for both residential users and also for industrial users who are bringing good jobs to Texas. So here is an example that shows you the transmission bottleneck. This is a picture from, 2 years ago, July the 12th, 2023. The colored map on the left-hand side demonstrates the price of wholesale power, and red means high price. And so at 5:30 in the afternoon on that day, you can see that most of the northern part of Texas is red. We had wholesale prices that were up to $800 a megawatt hour, and that's really high. On that same day, though, we had high demand, 81 gigawatts versus that record of 85. We had pretty good solar, we had good wind, lots of gas, but the problem is that we had the good wind in South Texas, and we don't have the transmission lines in place to bring that power up north where we need it. And that's the big reason for the disparity in prices that you can see. Those blue lines down, those blue colors in South Texas represent either low prices or in some cases negative prices. On that same day that we were having to pay dearly for power in the northern part of the state, there were companies who were generating wind power in South Texas that were paying to put it on the grid down there because they just couldn't move it up. So that transmission link is a big issue. There is a project underway right now, $330 million worth, and it's supposed to be completed in 2027, and hopefully it will solve that imbalance that you see on this chart. And there are some other bottlenecks. We're building lines. This is ERCOT's latest projection of power lines that they're going to be building. And you can see that we built some power. We built what, 250 something miles of high voltage power in 2024, a little less this year. We're looking to build it almost 400 miles in 2026. So we are building new high voltage lines, and because we have to, and we will be for the next 2 or 3 years. That's ERCOT's forecast. The big unknowns, there are two of them really. What about Bitcoin miners? A year ago, we had 8.5 gigawatts of demand by Bitcoin miners on the grid, and there's another 31 gigawatts supposedly coming by 2027. So that's a significant utilization of capacity for Bitcoin mining. And the other issue is the AI data centers. You've seen the projections and you've heard those in the news. It's just a massive amount of electricity will be going to AI data center. So the question is, can we provide that capacity? And if so, how reliable is it? Excuse me. The other threat is what people call behind the meter purchases. And an example of that would be if some big, let's just pick on Microsoft, for example. If some big company that had AI data centers came in and cut a deal with the owners of Comanche Peak Nuclear and said, we now want to take that nuclear output and make that exclusively available to us for our data centers. If that were to happen, it would remove that reliable power to the grid, and the rest of the grid would suffer increased reliability issues. That hasn't happened yet. It may never happen, but Microsoft tried to do that in Pennsylvania earlier, and at least as of the moment, they've been blocked from making that move by the federal government. So here is a big question. If you are having a crunch for supply, what do you do about that? One of the things that we have already done is you pay somebody to reduce their use. Back during that peak demand day of August in 2023, we had a Bitcoin miner in Rockdale that was using a fair amount of power. The PUC paid them $32 million to shut down, which they were happy to do. And in fact, the real bill was another $89 million that Texas still hasn't paid them. So that's one thing that we have done to help a situation when you're about to run out of power. So then you ask yourself, well, what about doing the same thing for commercial and residential consumers? Would you be willing turn your heater off in your house if they gave you some money for it? That's a question. Or would you let your local utility regulate your room thermostat? Another question. Or another possibility, which I don't think is very likely or very popular, would be you could just accept rolling blackouts every once in a while. That would need smaller microgrids to do, and I don't think that's really in the cards, but that's something that would happen if it had to. Okay, so here's my last chart really, and that's a what are we going to do chart. And this is my opinions and my opinions only, but I think in the near term that we must build some more natural gas generators as soon as we can, and we must build some more transmission lines. And I think we also should have some more wind. We've got way plenty of solar coming in. Longer term, after we get other dispatchable generation in place to cover the reliability and growth issues, then we can eliminate coal and bring in these nuclear small modular reactors. And then at some point, I don't know if it's 20 years or what down the road, then we can finally go clean energy all the way and eliminate natural gas. So that's my story, and I'd like to open it up now for questions. Kai, do you want to kind of lead that?
Okay. Bill or anybody, I think I turned off some of the speakers, so please open that up yourself and ask questions. Or let me kind of stop the sharing so they can see the other people.
That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
So Michael, read in your picture of the solution, you suggest the Dow experiment within 480.
Dow is going to say they are going to build 4 small modular reactors
for their own
80
use.
megawatts apiece for their own use.
Okay.
Solely their own use.
Yeah. So if that's economical, that can populate to other big corporations or cities, right?
They're not going to sell it to any cities.
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
no,
for their own use.
People will put money to the city, like some growing city like Cedar Park or whatever.
Yeah.
They're growing.
Some utility, I think, will need to start building these. They're perfect for old coal plants. It's an industrial facility that's got all the wires connected to it.
Yeah.
And when the coal plant shuts down,
right,
in an ideal world, in my ideal world, we would put some of these small modular reactors in that same space.
So the benefits are smaller footprint than solar or wind.
Yeah, as you can see, there's a huge amount of land that solar takes.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? There's a couple of things you didn't mention. Permian Basin wants about 24 gigawatts of power from ERCOT, and I can't tell that anybody's interested in building the generation for them. And there's another issue associated with Permian Basin, and that's whether it's served with 345 kV lines or 765, and that's an ongoing study right now. And I'm totally in agreement with AEP on the 765 need. Do you have any comments on that?
No, except to acknowledge that ERCOT sees the demand for power out in the Permian Basin. And that, I don't want to go back to it, but on that chart that I showed of where the demand is going to be, there was a little bar at the very top of that represented oil and gas facilities. So that the expectation that there will be some demand by the oil companies to convert like a compressor that drives a natural gas pipeline, going from a natural gas driven compressor to an electric driven compressor. That's just an example.
Right. They need that to meet air emission requirements out there.
Yeah.
The catch-22 is who's going to build a generation to serve? They need the power to expand their oil and gas production, but we need in order to have we need their production in order to build the power plants that we need to serve them. So it's a crazy chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, and then at the same time, somebody wants to take that same power from the Permian Basin and send it to California.
Yeah, that
Kai,
there's also a big computer center in San Antonio named Omicron, I believe. I think it's just west of the medical center, and it's almost 1,000 megawatts. And San Antonio is working closely with them to supply them. And also, I had heard that San Antonio is going to build a 250 megawatt nuclear plant, but I haven't seen much of that in the news.
Eugene, can you get closer to the laptop, the speaker?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now, now
It's
okay.
it's a cell phone.
Oh, okay, cell phone. Okay,
Yeah, is it okay now?
better than before. Yes.
Better. Well, I'm sorry. It's a cheap setup here.
Is Bill has a question or comment?
No, I just want to point out that there are questions in the chat.
Oh,
Oh,
yes, yeah, right, yes. Let me open that up.
I had a question. I After 2021, there was kind of an explosion of home rooftop solar, especially around Austin, I've seen. Do you have any kind of estimate on how much that's impacted the demand compared to, for the grid?
Very, very little.
very little.
We only had about 3 gigawatts of solar, rooftop solar capacity. California's got like 30. So really, rooftop solar, it may have boomed compared to where it used to be, but it's still quite low in broad comparison to the grid generation.
Yeah. Okay. I was curious. I mean, trying to get, I don't have rooftop solar, but I was installing a charger for my car, and it was very hard to hire an electrician for about a year there because they were all busy putting stuff in.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, and this is in the chat. I posted some questions in the chat, but one of the questions was geothermal was not mentioned as one of the part of the mix. And is it because you'd have to go so deep? Texas is not a good place for geothermal.
There is a company named Fervo, I think they're out of Houston, that is using oil and gas technology to develop some geothermal that might have good hope at some point in time. They're doing it out in Nevada, where the hot rocks are close to the surface, and they have successfully. What they're doing is the same thing an oil company is doing. They're going down, 5 miles and then going sideways, and they're fracking it, and they're bringing up hot water and generating electricity. They've been quite successful at it. And there's a hope that technology can go to places that aren't sitting on a hot rock like Central Texas. But right now, I have not seen anything that suggests that that's about to happen anytime soon. The geothermal is, for at least a few years, going to stay on the hot rocks, the few that we have out west. And I don't expect to see any coming to Texas anytime soon. It might one day.
The University of Texas has a study recommending an 85 megawatt test geothermal facility, and I think it's a good idea. They ought to build it. Somebody ought to build it.
Yeah.
Another question I put in the chat was part of the challenge for renewables, as we said, is the line infrastructure and the line losses. Would there be significant impact for localized non-grid applications of solar, such as like street lamps and such?
I'm sorry to have to ask you to repeat that question. I couldn't hear it very well.
Maybe please get closer to your speaker, or is it a laptop?
Right.
Yes.
Can you hear me well?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's better.
Yes.
All right. My question was, part of the challenge with these renewables is the infrastructure for the lines and the line losses. would there be significant impact on the off-the-grid applications of solar, like say a street lamp or those kind of applications?
I don't know that I have a good answer for that. My intuitive knee jerk is probably not much because you
Output, yeah,
it,
limit output.
it's just too small of applications to make a big difference in a grid that's 85 gigawatts. But I do not know really a good answer.
So for those who has a question, please unmute yourself first. I'll turn on some of the speakers due to some noise earlier.
I can do that, Kai. Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes.
It's Robert Estes. Maybe I can chime in on Mr. Dixon's question on the geothermal, because I'm pleased to be on the Science and Technology Advisory Team for the Utah Forge geothermal project.
Oh,
That's out in southern Utah, funded by the Department of Energy. And Fervo is drilling right there as well. I think Fervo is a Canadian company. But anyway, Fervo and Utah Forge have both demonstrated that the concept of enhanced geothermal, where they drill a pair of wells parallel through a hot rock formation and then circulate cold water down through one, percolating through fractures, natural fractures and man-made fractures in a heat exchanger, and then back up a production well. That can be done on a commercial basis. And you're right, it's lower level. 85 megawatts would be one of the largest in the world electric generations from geothermal. Most of those out there today are in the 5 to 10, some much less than that, 1 or 2 megawatt range. So for 85 gigawatts demand in Texas, even an 85, a large geothermal, an 85 megawatt capacity is very small. And that, to me, I put a note in the chat that sort of indicates what's wrong with all of these renewables, is that we're going out and gathering sunshine here and solar and gathering wind over there where the wind is. And we're gathering geothermal where the hot rock is underneath the geysers and the Yellowstone areas. But they're not where the demand is. The demand centers are the cities. And those demand centers have been fed in the past by large centralized nuclear or thermal plants that generate the electricity where you need it. So that's the real problem with this, renewables. And that's why we have had to put in so many of these interconnect lines and the gathering of the transmission lines at high voltage to transmit it to where the need is. So to me, that's the big problem. And why don't we have more geothermal? Geothermal is running up against today exactly what the petroleum business ran up against 20 years ago, when the offshore boom and the deep water boom in the Gulf of Mexico was trying to access petroleum reserves under the salt domes. And there was a lot of oil there. There's still a lot of oil there and gas, but we couldn't get to it and stopped in the early 2000s because we reached the maximum temperature of the instrumentation, the electronics that's required to guide the drilling process and evaluate the results down there. It was very fortunate that the fracking boom came along because it diverted attention from these deep, over 200 degrees C high temperature reservoirs to shallower reservoirs all over Texas that we are enjoying today at shallower depth, lower temperatures that we could get to. So as we run out of that, we have to refocus. What is it that we want for geothermal? Well, we're back to the high temperature, deep, hot reservoir. And I'm reminded of a comment that was made by the late Dr. Michael Payne at BP 20 years ago in Honeywell's headquarters when I was working on a high temperature electronics project And we were saying, these are high temperature, these are expensive parts. Is BP going to pay 10 times the cost to drill these deep reservoirs because we've now provided the high temperature electronics to enable it? And he said, no, hell no. BP can drill a lot of places. We'll just go somewhere else. We're not going to pay the high cost. The problem with geothermal is the product is the high temperature, so you can't go somewhere else. And I'll stop now, but that's my soapbox. Thank you.
That's very interesting.
Do you want to see the?
Hey, we have a couple of other more questions here in the chat box.
Can you read out, Bill?
Yeah, Anna Slobodova, are you a professor at UT Austin? She asked, what regulation is the Texas government considering to manage Bitcoin miners and or very large data centers? And she said, I work for UT Austin. Are there any data sets that are available publicly that I could give my students to analyze?
First, that I don't know how my wife. I got my wife's ID somehow, so I'm Warren Hunt.
Oh, okay.
I'm a professor at UT Austin in CS and electrical engineering, and so those are my questions. She was wondering. I don't know what happened. It may anyway. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I was just wondering about the regulation question and the and what I might give graduate students to chew on.
I think ERCOT told the data centers to go get their own generation.
I see. Okay. Well, then, that solves that problem. They're not a problem anymore. Their own thing. Okay. Now, with regard to, I heard that there was going to be this new transmission line from north to south that's going to help alleviate, some stress. But let's say I was to offer a power engineering class. And I don't know who is teaching power engineering now, if we even still are. Are there data sets or things that students might investigate to consider, just to get them introduced to the problem, or what's going on in this area?
I'm not aware of any. If anybody had them, I would assume it would be ERCOT, but
they have electrical databases. I tap into them. I run the ERCOT total grid studies for solar and wind clients, where you do a point of interconnection study to see how much power you can inject. And I see that bottleneck of wind generation trying to send power north. There just aren't enough lines to carry the power is the problem. I think they're building a line or a couple of lines to help.
Okay, but I mean, just in general, you don't know of any databases or meters that just record their, like which way the power is flowing or whatever on various lines at various times, just so they could be downloaded and then analyzed. Anything like that?
It might be available. You might just look. Why don't you ask ERCOT? Just ask them. Tell them your problem and ask them. They might help you.
Okay, well, I would just think this would be something they would be doing already, so I'm surprised.
Well,
okay.
they might to the data. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Here's another question, actually before the previous one. I've heard rumors that there is an SMR company in Austin. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
I don't either. SMR is small modular reactor. That's these advanced reactors that several companies are working on. Bill Gates has got one called TerraPower. X-Energy has got one. There are four or five others, and they range in size, but the main ones are in the 75 to 80 megawatts. Some of them are up to 300, and then some of them are focusing on really small applications. I am not aware of any of those companies that are in Austin. It might be. Does anybody else out there know
yes,
about
I asked Commissioner Glatfelty that, and he said, yeah, there is one in Austin. I can't tell you, I've forgotten the name, but he did mention that there is a company working on something. I could look through my emails to see if I could find it, but you could ask Glotfelty. I don't know what his email is now. He quit the PUC, but he was good at information like that. He headed up the nuclear task force with the PUC, wrote that report.
Now, the big companies in that business are still, they're 10 years out. Gates is supposed to start up in 2030. Carios has got a little different twist on that. And they're looking also in the 2030 range. Oklo, which is led by Sam Altman, he's the Chat GPT guy. He's got a technology that I think maybe it was Amazon. Somebody has cut a tentative contract with him to provide, I think, 6 of his at undetermined data location data centers. But again, that's all out in the 8 to 10 year future frame time. There is only one SMR company that actually has a license from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission right now, and their name is NuScale, and they've got a 75 megawatt generator that they would like to sell to somebody, but they don't have any takers yet. All these other companies have yet to receive their license permission from the NRC.
I thought BWX up in Maryland had a license.
They've got a license to run a test reactor. They don't have the full scale license for a commercial one.
Mm.
Okay, couple more here. Jody ever asked, why don't someone build, I guess, big solar panels over parking lots?
Well, people,
They are.
Yeah, the Austin Library right here where I live. There's a little Austin Library that's got some solar panels over the parking garage. The biggest application that sounds like that might even make sense, and China is doing some of it, and that is laying solar panels on big lakes, on water bodies that are not used for anything else. So they not only generate the power, but they also reduce the amount of evaporation of the water. So there are commercial applications. I'm not aware of any in this country, but I know China's got some big ones like that.
Some people have proposed. Some people have proposed using that over the Colorado River, taking water to California.
Yeah.
Here's one more question. Is there a way to estimate how much gas generation will be needed over, say, the next 10 years? What would be your best ballpark estimate?
Well, if you look at that growth forecast that I had on that chart, it says that we are going to go from, I'm trying to remember these numbers, so they may not be totally accurate, but we're going to go from 85 peak demand now to 140 gigawatt peak demand by 2030. And so that's 8 years and basically double in capacity. So we will need, a lot of more power. And some of that's going to come from new solar for sure. But again, that's just in the daytime. And if you're really going to add that much more power, in my opinion, you have no other option but to add a lot of natural gas. And I hope we can do it.
I don't think we can. Just looking at
the grid. Hard. Somebody's got to come up with the money for it.
Well, we got to have more lines, more generate. I mean, who's going to build all of that?
If it doesn't happen, unless some of you really smart electrical engineers who work for NVIDIA or somebody figure out how to make an AI chip that only uses a quarter of the power, that'd make a big difference. But I haven't heard that's coming anytime soon.
Well, that depends on software. They write smarter software than get that. seems to be transmission is one major problem on a big state like ours. I think China has developed some transmission technology can bring the power from the west part of the country to the east side.
Is that right?
So you can license some of the technology. You'll have quite a lot or share some technology.
I suggested to a fellow named Michael, forgotten his last name, at Austin Energy, if they built a DC line from Decker down to South Texas Project, they could build they could bring in wind, and they could also build nuclear down there, and they could bring that power in over the DC line and inject it inside the Austin area. He
What
said,
was his reaction to that?
he says, interesting, we'll look at it. But they published their generation plan, and I haven't looked at it. I think it's more conventional gas peakers.
Hard for me to imagine the city of Austin promoting any nuclear power. They're trying to get out of the South Texas project.
Well, here they were having trouble just getting STP power into the area. And so when we're bringing in a lot of renewable power, and we've got STP and coming in also, so there's not enough transmission. The one way to get more transmission and ensure that we're going to get our take of nuclear power, which is about 400 megawatts. If we build an 800 megawatt DC line, we could have 400 megawatts of wind and 400 megawatts of nuclear coming in and dumped off right into the Austin area. It was just a concept.
I have a question around the storage. Like, if we generate excess power, where are we storing right now? As a battery, or is there what is the storage way to when you generate the excess power, then it's actually consumed?
Well, most of the batteries
are down in the chat room. We're not too.
Most of the batteries are being associated with solar for picking up a load after sundown, because that's when the prices spike and the economics look best for batteries.
Yeah. We're going to get a big test of all this come Tuesday of next week.
That's what worries me.
With the big norther coming in. Most ERCOT,
oh man,
and I believe ERCOT, they said that we shouldn't have any problem getting through it. And I believe that, but it's going to be interesting to go on their website and just look at the generation about maybe 7 o'clock on next Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
Well, the wind will blow hard, and we'll be okay at first. But then, when the winds die down, and it's nighttime and cloudy, then we got one of those German. What do you call it?
Dunkelflaute.
Right.
Hey, Jim, what's the when they're adding new transmission lines, what's the mix of DC and AC for that?
I do not know that. Maybe somebody else does.
They're not building any DC lines inside ERCOT yet.
Really? I mean,
no, they've looked at them.
I just asked ChatGPT a few minutes ago, and it said that they had a mix, but
no, the DC lines, the DC connections are for out of state.
Really? Yeah. Okay. I was wondering. I don't know a whole lot about power, but a long time ago, I consulted for New England Digital to help them detect lightning strikes on lines for power coming down from Canada on DC. And that was a small problem for them. I thought lightning in Texas, it's got to be a much bigger problem.
Yeah, I do know that these two proposed ties, the Southern Cross to Mississippi and the other one going to El Paso, those are both high voltage DC lines. I know that.
Right. Yeah. Except the Western system is so weak. You can tie to it, but they can't transmit any power over there on their end. Whereas Southern Cross line is tying into a solid location over there. It might work. Okay. So, but it's only 2,000 megawatts, and we have a lot more growth than that.
Yeah.
Any more questions from other part of the city, Houston or Galveston, Dallas,
How about Austin?
Austin? Yes.
Okay, just another question. I mean, first, thank you for giving this talk. Is
Yeah, we are.
other than a good Samaritan job of, letting us know about where things are, if you will. I mean, is there some group or some thing that is trying to inform, let's say, some of the congressional members in the Texas House or Senate or anything like this that, could provide them, or have they asked for any information that, this somebody with your skills would have, could give them some information and say, well, this is what we understand. I mean, is there any attachment, I'll say, to this body of knowledge that these people represent to state government?
The closest thing I can think of is this working group that put out that report last month that I mentioned. You can go online and get a copy of that report. And it's really quite comprehensive. And so I think the answer is that report is the design of providing information to the legislators who are supposed to be, who are going to be asking that question in the next 2 or 3 months.
Also, there are videos of them talking to the legislature that are quite interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It can, as a part, like the email that I received letting me know about this meeting, could there be a follow-up email that has what pointers you have to the, I'll say, available articles or knowledge about this topic area? In other words, where are the 5 best links or something, just to get one educated?
I really don't. I put together this PowerPoint, and I probably consulted 500 websites, and I on my slides. I think this is going to be recorded. So if you're interested, you can go back and look on each of the slides. I tried to put my main information source. So you'll see a little logo for EIA or text or somebody on most of my charts. And that's basically where I got the information. But I do not have a bibliography or recommended reading or anything like that.
Well, I have a few links on videos I could help.
Okay.
Well, just and will there be a follow-up message that says where the recording of this is being posted so people can, I can ask students to watch it, for instance?
Yes, you'll be in our website, the live member website. So come back in 1 week, then you'll be there. Or go to the IEEE live member website or the consultant network website, where two sites that can publish this. And you get the Jim's email address in case you want to talk to Jim, directly. You're welcome to. Or where some expert like Eugene is in the power business. If you really share his opinion, you can also contact him.
Well, so I have friends who sent me links of videos and they were talking about it. So that's how I got some of my information on which video links.
Okay.
I look forward to that as well. Thank you.
They're interesting. Gladfeld did a great job. I was sad to see him resign. He took a rather scathing criticism from Lieutenant Governor, and I think it kind of wasn't helpful. Let's put it that way. So he quit.
Okay, well, thank you for your interest. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody. Any last question or you have more questions, you can, go to the website and find Jim's email address and talk to him directly.
I just wanted to. There was a comment earlier about data centers building their own geothermal power plants. And Fervo, in fact, is one of those geothermal companies that is funded right now by Google for a data center. And they are building a geothermal power plant under what's going to be the location for a new AI data center. big server farm. And that makes sense because both can be located somewhere where it's convenient, near the geothermal source, and the load and the source are then close by.
Yeah. Yeah, I know 'cause some of them have the data center in Iceland. There are a lot of
Right.
geothermal energies.
I wanted to make a comment before we go. I'm associated with the University of Texas here in Tyler, and I'm 70 years old. I'm not really a power guy, but I wanted to make the observation that if you look at the mean age of the people that were in the audience tonight and compare that to the students that are graduating, it's almost like we were missing an entire generation of people that were knowledgeable about, and getting educated about power. And I was going to comment that when I went to Illinois as a graduate student in the late 70s and early 80s, they were tearing out the power labs out of the electrical engineering building because there was no demand for it whatsoever. And I'm happy to report that, just as the professor, gentleman from Austin was saying, there at the UT Tyler campus, there is also, classes now in power. And I see a renewed interest brought on by both renewables, battery storage, the use of DC versus AC, and just, changes to the industry. And so I think there's some hope that, we will get new people coming into the industry, but it's been kind of discouraging for me to see that, for a long time, there was really not a lot of interest in the power side of the educational process. And it's good to see that that is starting to change. And thank you for this lecture tonight or this talk tonight, because I think this is the kind of thing that we need to have people see. We have serious issues that need to be solved, and we're going to need people to solve them. And not all the people here are going to be alive long enough to be those people, frankly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we have the live member group. That's why we're a little bit older than most of us are older than 65 to be a member. But we do have a power engine group, our system group. I will inform them to have more power related topic. I think there are all kind of practical topic recently, but this is a good topic. I think I asked them to organize some more speakers from the industry, and all our meetings are open to public. So just go to our Central Texas section website. We have monthly letter out. Then you can find out, what they call the PES, the Power Engine Group. They have younger people. They have few still working. So hopefully they can organize some meeting like this one. Yeah.
That was a very good talk, Jim. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So kind of to be fair, this is one of the first month of the year we have more than 100 people register. And at the peak, we see 55 people coming to the meeting. So Jimmy did a good job.
Welcome.
Topic.
Thanks for organizing. All that from an 81-year-old chemical engineer who knows not much about electricity.
Hey, well,
thanks for organizing it. Thank you. That was good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see you next month. Next month we have another professional in our building who can talk economics. So he's part of the Washington-based economists. So probably with new region, probably new policy, and you go do some scenario analysis. So hopefully you can join us. So once you sign up, you'll be on the mailing list. So we'll keep you informed what we have. All right. So good night, everybody. So any other Bill or Louis, you have any other comment, or Tom? I just see you show up.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's give a
Thank you.
hand to Jim, and then we'll see you next month. All right. Okay. Bye.
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 Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah. We had good feedback.
That worked out fine.
Yeah.
I thought.
So let me see. I need to. Okay. I need to. And
really great talk.
Yes. Yeah, we enjoy and learn a lot. So we'll publish this presentation, also the video later in our website.